Tell us what you found out with your researchers and the miners about the dirt on Ron DeSantis.
We were looking through just what's out there on the internet, and we ran across a reference to him being a member of this St. Elmo Hall secret society. And we discovered that we didn't find it on Wikipedia, that his name was not on there. So some of our people started looking at the Wayback Machine, archive.org, and discovered that over the last 2 years, he had been listed as a member of St. Elmo Hall. But then, wouldn't you know it, just 3 days ago, his name disappeared from that list. So the current Wikipedia will not have. If you type St. Elmo Hall, you will not find it.
That's unbelievable. Oh, excuse me. How many times has that happened in your research that after you did an article, within days, the Wikipedia changed to hide the most damaging
Well,
facts?
in this case, it happened while the research was being done, before we had said anything about it. So that obviously is red meat to a dog to honest researchers. And so we started asking what this St. Elmo Hall is. We'd never heard of it. And it's associated with a fraternity by the symbol of Delta Phi. It started in 1889, and it was sort of this subsidiary version of the Delta Phi fraternity, which started in like 1830s. And it was specifically formed to create an association with the Knights of Malta. Before we ever studied the Knights of Malta, I wouldn't have thought anything about that. But now that we have the data and have the research, we realized, oh my gosh, do we have a tiger by the tail here? Because now we've gone into the research at AFI and pulled out all the documents and realized that 1889 was a seminal year in the New World Order creation of the new British Empire. And by that, I mean there were a number of things happening right then in 1889. They were all related to the Rothschild and Cecil Rhodes, who was a business partner of Lord Walter Rothschild. And in that same year, they assisted Queen Victoria in starting something called the Knights of Malta English Priory, which essentially created a new secret society that would not be controlled by the Pope, but would be controlled by the Queen. Andrew Carnegie was likely an early knight of the Knights of Malta, just like John Roberts, our Chief Justice, is today. Oh, in that same year, the Queen, by charter, started the British South Africa Company. Now, this is huge because we can see that the British South Africa Company was the first corporate player in the New World Order that would be run by corporations and not governments. They put Cecil Rhodes in charge of. They made him a privy councillor a few years later. In 1889, Lord Rosebery was a part of that, and he had inherited the N.M. Rothschild fortune. Baron Henry de Worms, Lord Pirbright, was the Minister of Trade at that time. He actually, in 1889, became a privy councillor. And just go on and on. And wouldn't you see this, that this St. Elmo Hall was created immediately at the same time that all this was happening? Because we now know that Yale, Columbia, and Harvard were thick as thieves with Oxford and Cambridge. And so besides going to Yale, DeSantis then went to Harvard. So he got well schooled in this Anglo-American British alliance that he then has continued to carry on to this day. He went from there, he went into the Navy, worked with the Advocate General in the Navy. In other words, he's never been anything but an attorney, so he has no real life experience. He then became a congressman, and then he became governor. It all happened too quick. I think they screwed the pooch on his story because it's so obvious that it happened too quick that it shows that he is a kept man. And then when we discover today that his sister worked for KPMG in the shady covered accounts section of KPMG, named after a pilgrim by the name of Paul Volcker, we then see a more complete picture that it's quite likely that she was taken out probably to let DeSantis know who was pulling his chain.